"You're a thief and a liar, Barrett!" Silas Thorne's voice cracked like a bullwhip across the crowded Tucson street, silencing the saloon piano. He hurled a leather pouch into the horse manure at Cole's boots. The coins spilled, gleaming in the harsh 1878 sun. "Take your severance. If I see you on my land again, I'll hang you myself." The townspeople sneered, waiting for the accused cowboy to break, to beg, or to draw his gun and die. Instead, Cole Barrett stoically picked up his meager pay, his eyes flat and cold. "Keep your land, Silas," Cole murmured. The Arizona sun of 1878 was a merciless anvil, hammering down on the sprawling, dusty thoroughfare of Tucson. Heat shimmered in visible waves above the adobe rooftops and the rutted dirt of Congress Street. Cole Barrett stood in the center of the thoroughfare, the focal point of a town's collective, suffocating scorn. He was a man carved from the harsh landscape itself, lean, weathered, with eyes the color of a bruised twilight sky, and right now, those eyes were fixed on Silas Thorne, the wealthiest rancher in the territory, a man whose tailored silk vests could not hide the rot of his soul. "I said, 'You're done in this territory, Barrett,'" Thorne sneered, his heavy jowls quivering with manufactured righteous indignation. He stood on the boardwalk outside the Crystal Palace saloon, elevated above Cole, both physically and socially. Flanking him were 4 of his hired guns, hands resting lazily on the walnut grips of their Colt peacemakers. The crowd that had gathered was a sea of judgmental faces, merchants, miners, and fellow cowboys who had shared coffee with Cole just days prior. Now, they muttered insults, their allegiances easily bought by Thorne's influence. Thorne had accused Cole of rustling, of incompetence, of drinking on the job, a litany of lies designed to ruin him. Cole knew the truth. He had been fired because he had seen too much. He had noticed the discrepancies in Thorne's herd counts, the strange tracks leading south toward the Dragoon Mountains, the altered brands that Thorne thought were cleverly disguised. Cole did not scream his innocence. He knew the futility of arguing with a man who owned the judge, the sheriff, and the bank. To break down, to shout, or to draw his Winchester .73 would only end in his blood soaking the dust, giving Thorne the ultimate victory. Instead, Cole endured the humiliation with a quiet, impenetrable dignity. He slowly bent down, his joints popping, and retrieved the silver dollars Thorne had thrown into the muck. He wiped the filth from the coins with his thumb, deliberately, agonizingly slow. "I reckon a man's character is shown by what he throws away, Silas," Cole said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that carried surprisingly well in the stifling heat. He dropped the coins into his pocket. He didn't look at the crowd. He turned his back on Thorne, exposing himself to the guns of the rancher's men, a silent challenge that dared them to shoot an unarmed man in the back. They didn't. They were cowards, through and through. Cole walked to the hitching post where his roan gelding, Rusty, stood waiting. He untied the reins, mounted smoothly, and rode south out of Tucson without looking back. The whispers and laughter faded into the dry wind, but the sting of the injustice settled deep in his chest. It wasn't just his reputation Thorne had stolen. It was his livelihood, his place in the world. But Thorne had made a fatal miscalculation. He believed Cole was just an ignorant cowboy, easily discarded. He didn't know about the small, worn leather ledger tucked securely in the inner pocket of Cole's canvas duster. For 6 months, Cole had been quietly sketching the brands, documenting the dates, and mapping the trails Thorne's night riders took. He also didn't know that Cole, as a boy, had lived near the San Carlos reservation, learning to read tracks that a bloodhound would miss, and picking up fragments of the Apache tongue. Cole wasn't riding away to lick his wounds. He was riding into the high desert to find the absolute proof he needed, Thorn had recently secured a massive, lucrative contract to supply the U.S. cavalry at Fort Lowell with fresh remounts. Suddenly, Thorn's herd had swelled by 200 head of magnificent horses. Cole knew those horses hadn't been bought. They had been stolen from the Chiricahua Apache, a move that threatened to ignite a bloody war across the territory, and Cole intended to stop it. As the Catalina Mountains receded behind him, and the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Sonoran Desert opened up, Cole's mind sharpened into a cold, focused point. The humiliation in Tucson was a fire that would forge his resolve. He would track Thorn's rustlers, find the stolen herd, and tear down Thorn's empire brick by corrupt brick. The cowboy they had mocked was gone. The tracker had awakened. For 3 days, Cole Barrett became a ghost, haunting the alkali flats and jagged canyons of the Dragoon Mountains. The terrain here was a nightmare of twisted mesquite, catclaw acacia, and towering saguaros that stood like silent sentinels under the blazing Arizona sky. It was a landscape that forgave no mistakes, a place where a man could die of thirst 100 yards from a hidden tinaja. But Cole read the desert like a scholar reads a book. He found the trail easily enough. Moving 200 head of horses left a scar on the earth that even the wind couldn't quickly erase. The crushed sagebrush, the snapped twigs of greasewood, the depth of the hoofprints in the sandy washes, they all spoke to Cole. He noted the distinctive unshod prints of Apache ponies mixed with the heavier tracks of Thorn's shod quarter horses. Each night, huddled over a fire no larger than a teacup to avoid detection, Cole pulled out his leather ledger. By the flickering light, he updated his maps, his charcoal pencil scratching against the rough paper. He had deduced Thorn's motive. Thorn wasn't just stealing to fulfill the army contract. He was trying to incite the Apache to break their uneasy peace and attack the local settlements. If war broke out, the army would pour troops into the territory, and Thorn's profits from beef and horse contracts would skyrocket. The cruelty was entirely calculated, driven by an insatiable, sociopathic greed. On the 4th afternoon, the trail led into a narrow, treacherous defile known as Deadman's Wash. The sheer rock walls radiated heat, baking Cole in his saddle. As he navigated the winding canyon, the wind shifted, bringing with it the unmistakable scent of dust, manure, and a massive herd of horses. He dismounted, tying Rusty securely in a hidden alcove, and proceeded on foot, his Winchester gripped loosely in his right hand. He climbed a steep, rocky outcropping, moving with the agonizing slowness of a stalking cougar. Cresting the ridge, he looked down into a hidden box canyon, completely enclosed save for the narrow entrance. Below him, grazing on the sparse yellow grass and drinking from a shallow spring, were 200 magnificent horses. They were a breathtaking mix of painted Appaloosas, sturdy Mustangs, and swift line-backed duns, the stolen wealth of a tribe. But it was what he saw near the perimeter of the camp that made his blood run cold. Guarded by 5 of Thorn's most brutal men, huddled beneath the meager shade of an overhanging cliff, were 20 Apache women. They were bound at the wrists with rough hemp rope, their vibrant traditional dresses torn and dusted with ash. Thorn's men lounged nearby, drinking coffee and laughing, occasionally tossing a stone or a cruel word toward the captives. Cole's grip on his rifle tightened until his knuckles turned white. He understood the horrific logic instantly. These women had likely been tending the herd in a secluded valley when Thorn's men struck. To leave them alive and free would mean the Apache warriors would know exactly who took their horses, bringing the wrath of the tribe down on Thorn before he could sell the herd to the army. By taking the women captive, Thorn eliminated the witnesses and gave himself time. Cole observed the camp for hours, memorizing the patrol routes, the blind spots, and the rotation of the guards. His eyes kept returning to one woman in particular. She sat slightly apart from the others, her back straight despite her bindings, her chin raised in a posture of unbroken defiance. She had hair the color of polished obsidian and eyes that burned with a fierce, intelligent fire. Even from a distance, Cole could sense her quiet strength. She was watching the guards, not with fear, but with the calculating gaze of a warrior assessing an enemy. The sun began to dip below the canyon rim, casting long, bloody shadows across the canyon floor. Cole slid back down the ridge. He couldn't just ride to Fort Lowell. By the time the cavalry arrived, Thorne's men might move the herd, or, worse, decide the women were no longer necessary to keep alive. He had to act tonight. He had to get the horses out, get the women out, and he couldn't do it alone. He needed the defiant woman with the obsidian hair. The night fell like a heavy velvet curtain, cloaking the box canyon in profound darkness. The only light came from the campfire, where 3 of Thorne's men were snoring loudly, an empty whiskey jug resting nearby. 2 guards remained on watch, one near the canyon entrance, the other pacing near the captive women. Cole moved like a shadow detached from the rock wall. He had left his boots with Rusty, walking only in thick wool socks to silence his steps on the gravel. He approached the guard near the women first. The man was rolling a cigarette, the flare of his match temporarily blinding his night vision. In that split second, Cole struck. He clamped a calloused hand over the man's mouth and brought the heavy brass butt of his revolver down hard on the guard's temple. The man crumpled without a sound. Cole dragged the unconscious guard into the deeper shadows and immediately turned to the women. They had watched the silent takedown, their eyes wide but perfectly silent. He moved to the woman who had caught his eye earlier. He knelt beside her, holstering his gun, and pulled a hunting knife from his belt. She didn't flinch as the steel approached her wrists. He sliced the heavy ropes. She rubbed her chafed skin, her dark eyes locking onto his. "I am Cole," he whispered, keeping his voice barely above a breath. To his surprise, he spoke it in halting, rusty Apache. "She Cole." The woman's eyes widened a fraction in surprise, then narrowed in immediate suspicion. She replied in flawless, unaccented English. "I am Naya Redbird. Why does a white man risk his neck for Apache women?" "Because the men who took you are the same men who ruined me," Cole whispered back, working quickly to cut the bindings of the other women. "Thorne wants a war. I want Thorne in a cage. But right now, we just need to get out of this canyon." Naya evaluated him. She saw the lack of cruelty in his eyes, the rough competence in his hands, and the quiet dignity he carried, similar to the elders of her tribe. "One man cannot drive 200 horses and protect 20 women," she stated practically. "That's why it's a partnership," Cole said, cutting the last rope. He looked at Naya, offering a pragmatic deal. "I have the guns, and I know the way to a cavalry patrol I spotted a day north of here. You know horses better than any man alive. You organize the herd, keep the women safe. I'll drop the guards at the entrance and cause a distraction. We stampede them out." It was a practical arrangement, born of desperate necessity. Neither trusted the other fully, but survival demanded cooperation. Naya nodded once, a sharp, decisive movement. She turned to the other women, speaking rapidly in whispered Apache, organizing them, issuing commands. The air of despair vanished, replaced by focused intensity. Cole crept toward the canyon entrance. The second guard was leaning against a boulder, rifle resting on his hip. Cole picked up a fist-sized rock and threw it hard against the opposite canyon wall. The sharp crack echoed loudly. The guard jumped, raising his rifle and stepping away from the narrow exit to investigate. It was the opening they needed. From the rear of the canyon, a piercing, unearthly cry shattered the night. The collective yell of 20 Apache women. Simultaneously, they slapped the rumps of the nearest mustangs with the ropes that had bound them. The herd, already nervous from being penned in, exploded into motion. The ground trembled as 200 horses surged forward like a furry, muscular tidal wave. The guard at the entrance turned, eyes wide in terror, just in time to see the wall of horseflesh bearing down on him. He dove desperately out of the way into the thorny mesquite. Cole vaulted onto a passing dun horse bareback, grabbing a fistful of mane. Through the swirling, choking dust, he saw Naya mounted on a stunning roan, riding with breathtaking grace, herding the flank, her dark hair flying like a banner in the wind. The practical arrangement had begun. They burst out of the canyon and into the moonlit desert, a thundering storm of vengeance and survival. The escape was a grueling, relentless marathon through the unforgiving dark. For hours the desert echoed with the thunder of 800 hooves, the crack of makeshift quirts, and the sharp whistles of the women driving the herd. Cole rode point, his Winchester across his lap, his eyes scanning the silver-lit landscape for treacherous ravines or thorns pursuing men. The sheer physical toll of riding bareback at a gallop was agonizing, but the adrenaline and the stakes kept him anchored to the horse. As false dawn painted the eastern horizon in bruised shades of purple and grey, they reached the safety of a deep, winding arroyo that offered cover and sparse grazing. Cole raised his hand, signaling a halt. The massive herd slowed, chests heaving, coats lathered with white sweat, settling into the dry riverbed. The women immediately went to work, checking the horses' legs, finding shallow pools of water, and establishing a perimeter. Cole slid from his horse, his legs nearly giving out from the strain. He walked to a high vantage point, sitting cross-legged in the dust, his rifle resting on his knees. He began to load fresh cartridges into the Winchester, the mechanical clack-clack, a comforting rhythm in the quiet morning. He heard soft footsteps behind him. Naya approached, carrying a battered tin canteen she had scavenged from the canyon camp. She sat beside him, the silence between them no longer filled with suspicion, but with a shared, exhausted understanding. She offered the canteen. "Drink," she commanded gently. Cole took it, the tepid water tasting sweeter than fine wine. "Thank you." Naya looked out over the herd, then back to Cole. She had watched him through the night. She saw how he prioritized the safety of the slowest horses, how he positioned himself between the women and the exposed rear of the herd. He hadn't demanded gratitude. He hadn't treated them as helpless victims or exotic prizes. He treated them as equals, as partners in a desperate bid for freedom. In a world where white men usually brought only pain and deceit to her people, this man, cast out by his own kind, was a stark anomaly. "You could have ridden to the army, brought them to the canyon," Naya said softly, her dark eyes studying his weathered profile. "It would have been safer for you." "The army moves slow," Cole replied, his voice rough. "Thorn moves fast. By the time the bluecoats arrived, you would have been dead, and the horses sold. I couldn't stomach that. A man has to live with his own reflection." Naya processed this. In Apache culture, actions spoke louder than any words, and bravery in the defense of others was the highest virtue. This bruised, discarded cowboy possessed a warrior's spirit. The practical arrangement they had formed in the dark canyon was shifting, evolving into something deeper, something rooted in profound, mutual respect. She leaned closer to him. The other 19 women had gathered near the base of the ridge, looking up at Cole. There was no fear in their eyes now, only a fierce, solemn reverence. Naya's voice was a soft rasp, carrying the weight of her entire tribe's gratitude. She spoke in Apache, then translated for him, her words a solemn vow in the quiet dawn. "You walked into the dark for us. You bled your own people's pride to save our honor." She reached out, her fingers gently brushing the dust from the sleeve of his coat. The cowboy found 200 horses stolen from the tribe, and 20 Apache women whisper, "Now we are yours." Cole swallowed hard, the deep emotion of the moment catching in his throat. "I don't own you, Naya. None of you. I just wanted to do what was right." "It is not ownership, Cole Barrett." Naya smiled faintly, a beautiful, rare expression. "It is loyalty. Our lives belong to your cause until the debt is paid. We ride with you. We fight with you." Cole looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the strength, the intelligence, the sheer, indomitable will that mirrored his own. In his darkest moment, humiliated and alone, he had found the most steadfast allies a man could ask for. And in Naya, he felt the first stirrings of a slow-burn bond that he knew, with sudden certainty, would change the trajectory of his life forever. "Then let's get ready," Cole said, standing up and checking the action of his rifle. "Because Thorn isn't going to let his payday walk away. He'll be coming." The dust cloud appeared on the southern horizon just past noon. Cole watched it grow from his vantage point, atop the Arroyo Ridge. He counted 12 riders. Thorn had brought his entire outfit. They were pushing their horses hard, furious and reckless, expecting to find fleeing women and a lone, disgraced cowboy. They did not expect a meticulously laid trap. "They come," Naya said, standing beside him with a scavenged Winchester she had taken from the canyon. She held it with practiced ease. "Let them come into the narrows," Cole instructed, his voice eerily calm. "We hold our fire until I shoot." Cole had chosen this specific arroyo because it bottlenecked into a tight gorge of high, unclimbable sandstone walls. More importantly, he knew this gorge led directly toward the patrol route of Captain Miller's C Troop of the U.S. Cavalry out of Fort Lowell, the very detachment Thorn was trying to secure a contract with. Cole had scouted them 3 days prior. Thorn's men rode into the gorge, cursing and shouting. Silas Thorn himself was near the front, his face purple with rage, a shotgun resting on his saddle pommel. "Find them! Spread out!" he bellowed, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. "Now," Cole whispered. He didn't aim for a man. He aimed his Winchester at a dead, hollow cottonwood tree hanging precariously over the gorge entrance, and squeezed the trigger. The heavy 4440 slug shattered the trunk. The tree crashed down behind Thorn's men, blocking their retreat and spooking their horses in the confined space. Instantly, Naya and several of the women fired warning shots into the dirt in front of the riders. The canyon erupted in chaotic echoes. Thorn's men, trapped and bewildered by the sudden organized resistance, fought to control their panicked mounts. "Hold your fire, Thorn!" Cole's voice boomed down from the ridge, authoritative and unyielding. Thorn looked up, squinting against the sun. "Barrett, you dead son of a bitch! I'll skin you alive for stealing my herd." "It was never your herd, Silas," Cole called back, standing up so he was clearly visible. Before Thorn could order his men to return fire, the rhythmic pounding of heavy cavalry horses shook the earth from the northern end of the gorge. Captain Miller and 20 blue-coated troopers rode into view, carbines drawn, forming a blockade. They had heard the gunfire and rushed to investigate. "Drop your weapons, all of you, by order of the United States Army," Captain Miller shouted. Thorn's men, seeing they were hopelessly outgunned and surrounded, quickly threw their rifles to the dirt. Thorn, however, puffed out his chest, trying to salvage his arrogance. "Captain Miller, thank God. This rustler, Cole Barrett, and these Apache savages stole my remount herd. Arrest them." Cole climbed down the ridge, Naya right beside him. He walked straight toward Captain Miller, completely ignoring Thorn's venomous glare. Cole reached into his duster and pulled out the worn leather ledger. He handed it up to the captain. "Captain, inside you'll find dates, times, and maps of Silas Thorn's rustling operations for the last 6 months," Cole said evenly. You'll find drawings of how his men altered the Chiricahua brands to look like his own. And if you have your men inspect the flanks of those 200 horses right now, you'll see the fresh burns over the tribal marks." Captain Miller flipped through the pages, his eyes widening at the meticulous, irrefutable evidence. The hidden skill Cole had built quietly in the shadows was now a blazing spotlight of truth. "He's lying! It's a forgery!" Thorne spat, panic finally cracking his arrogant facade. "Furthermore," Cole continued, turning to Naya. Naya stepped forward, her voice ringing clear and authoritative in English. "I am Naya Redbird of the Chiricahua. This man, Thorne, ordered his men to kidnap me and 19 of my sisters to prevent us from telling our chief that he stole our herd. He sought to start a war between our people and yours to line his pockets." Captain Miller snapped the ledger shut. He looked at Thorne with absolute disgust. The concrete motive was laid bare. "Mr. Thorne, you are under arrest for grand theft, kidnapping, and treasonous instigation of hostilities. Cuff him, Sergeant." As the soldiers dragged a screaming, thrashing Silas Thorne from his horse, stripping him of his wealth, his dignity, and his freedom, Cole watched with quiet satisfaction. Hard karma had finally arrived, delivered not by a bullet, but by the relentless weight of the truth. Thorne's public humiliation was absolute, a mirror to Cole's own a week prior, but infinitely more permanent. Cole turned to Naya. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. Practical arrangement over. Naya looked at the captive Thorne, then at the herd, and finally rested her gaze on Cole. Her eyes were warm, filled with an emotion that transcended the chaos of the day. "No, Cole. I think it is just beginning." The journey to the Chiricahua stronghold deep in the mountains was a triumphant procession. Captain Miller had provided a military escort to ensure their safe passage, but Cole and Naya rode at the head of the herd, side by side. The tension that had coiled in Cole's gut for months was finally unwinding. He had cleared his name, prevented a war, and found something he hadn't realized he was searching for. A place where he truly belonged. When they reached the sprawling encampment, the reaction was overwhelming. The safe return of the women and the horses was greeted with tears, drumming, and fierce celebrations. The tribal elders listened intently as Naya recounted the story in rapid Apache, her hands gesturing gracefully as she described Cole's bravery, his tactical mind, and his unwavering respect. Cole stood near the edge of the council fire, feeling out of place but honored. He expected to be thanked and sent on his way. He was a white man, after all, an outsider. But when the chief approached him, flanked by the warriors, the old man placed a hand on Cole's shoulder. "You have the skin of our enemies, but the heart of an Apache," the chief said, Naya translating softly beside him. "You are welcome by our fires. You are a brother to this tribe." Later that night, away from the noise of the celebration, Cole and Naya walked near the grazing herd. The moonlight painted the rugged landscape in silver. The slow-burn bond that had ignited in a dark canyon and grown through fire and dust had finally consumed the barriers between them. "You don't have to go back to Tucson," Naya said quietly, stopping to look at him. She didn't wear the torn dress of a captive anymore, but a beautiful buckskin tunic adorned with beads. She looked radiant, strong, and utterly captivating. "There is nothing for you there." "I know," Cole said, his voice husky. He reached out, his calloused fingers gently tracing the line of her jaw. She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering shut for a moment. "Tucson was just a place I worked. Here with you. This is the first time I've felt like I'm home." He leaned in, and she met him halfway. The kiss was slow, deep, and tasting of dust and promise. It was the sealing of a partnership forged in adversity, a genuine love born from mutual respect and shared survival. Cole Barrett, the disgraced cowboy, had lost his job, his reputation, and his pride in the white man's world. But in the heart of the Apache territory, alongside the woman who saw his true worth, he had found his soul. The 200 horses grazed peacefully in the distance, safe. The 20 women slept securely in their lodges. And Cole Barrett held Naya close, knowing that the greatest treasure he had recovered from Silas Thorne wasn't the herd, but the woman in his arms. Spring 1885. The San Pedro River ran high and clear, cutting through the vibrant green of the valley. Cole Barrett wiped the sweat from his brow, leaning against the sturdy wooden fence of his own sprawling ranch. Beside him, a young boy with dark, intelligent eyes and a shock of sandy hair was trying to lasso a wooden calf. Naya walked out onto the porch of their adobe home, carrying a pitcher of cold lemonade, her laughter ringing out across the yard as the boy's rope tangled around his own boots. Cole smiled, a deep, genuine expression that reached his eyes. Silas Thorne was rotting in a federal penitentiary in Yuma, a forgotten ghost of the past. Cole had built a thriving horse-breeding operation, acting as a trusted liaison between the Army and the Apache, fostering a lasting, prosperous peace. He watched Naya walk toward him, the sun catching the silver in her dark hair, his heart swelling with an enduring, quiet gratitude for the day the cowboy found his true path. If you enjoyed this gritty Western tale of justice and slow-burn romance, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling audio dramas and stories of the frontier.